And we're back for a video on highlighting 15mm figures for the Little Wars TV Army Painting Challenge for the Dark Ages. Now, it looks like a little bit of a mess here because I've got about 62 infantry, couple of cavalry here. And right now, I'm just going to do a short little video on how I highlight 15mm figures. So these have all been base coated, and then I've applied a wash of Army Painter Soft Tone with a little bit of medium mixed into it. You can see I've got some infantry here. And I'm going to focus on highlighting some of these darker colors. So I have this, I used Luftwaffe uniform World War II as a nice kind of desaturated darkish bluish color. And now I put the shade on it so it's darkened down and it's also gotten into the recesses. But it is also kind of hit this figure and it's made everything a little muted and brown. So what I want to go back in and do is I want to take my base color, my Luftwaffe blue, and then because this is such a dark color, I'm going to mix in a little bit of Stone Golem Gray. You could use white too, I just happen to be using this very light gray. And then, because these are 15mm figures, we don't really need to worry about hitting every little exact detail. What we want to do is we want to think about light coming down and hitting this character at roughly from above. And we want to hit areas that are going to be hit by light. So the recess here and the kind of the fold of the cloak, the inner fold of the cloak, I'm going to want to leave that shaded. And I'm going to want to hit the raises of the cloak, the raised portions of the cloak, and the edges of the cloak with my new ever so slightly lightened blue color. Now this is going to look very light going on because it is still reflective when it is wet, and when it's reflective, it highlights more light. On the front of the figure, again, we're going to want to hit not everything, but just the areas of interest and leave the shadows in there. Similar thing, this figure is actually 3D printed here, and he's got this blue cloak. So you can really see a lot of recesses here that have gotten darkened down. So I really want to put in a little bit of work highlighting these raised portions and the edges of the cloak. And this is 15mm, and they're going to be moving around ranked together. So I don't need to worry about necessarily the smoothest transitions and the sharpest highlights, because this is simply not that kind of 28 or 32mm scale where individual figures are going to be inspected. I just want some bright colors on this figure to contrast with the darker ones so that it gives it a little bit more definition, especially in the front. I want to hit a little bit of this cloak. You just put little dabs to put a little bit of interest in there. Similar with the Shield Maiden with her blue. The top of her shirt, the front of her shirt, the bottom of her tunic that's sticking out, the tops of her arms. If I spin her around, the very edge of her elbow is going to be a good place. A lot of these details, these are March to Hell 15mm figures that I 3D printed. You know, at 28mm, there's a lot of fabric folds here that you can highlight and you can layer, and that's great. But when you scale it down to 15mm, they're really just guidelines to getting some highlights on there. Now, if this was a major character, I might go in with one extra layer, but this is just a kind of a general troop for my army, and I can leave it at that. Now, I do have a character here who happens to be wearing blue. He's my priest, my kind of Thor priest, and I've already gone in and I'm hit him with the highlights, you can see. But because he is kind of a character, I do want to give him another pass. He's, you know, not my war band leader, but again, he's going to be a special character. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Stone Golem, my light gray, or your white, whatever you happen to be using. A little bit more of that into my Luftwaffe blue, or whatever color it is you're using. Mix it all up. You want to make sure that this is thin. Not so thin that it's going all over the place, but adding a little bit of water to it off camera, because when I add that pure paint into it, it thickens it up a little bit, and it makes it more opaque, and you don't want to be dealing with that opacity, because then that's going to make your highlights really, really chunky. So I'm just going to go in and try to, with my smaller, with the brush, not completely cover my original highlights. Again, I'm not doing this on every troop. I'm just doing this on characters. Just try to hit little areas of interest. The edge of his big old sleeves, the top of his sleeves that would receive the most light. Flip him around, he's got a lot here. Just a little bit on the areas that are gonna get the most light. This is not even my best brush. I saved those for 20mm figures. And just a little bit of work. What's this taking us, like 60 seconds? A little bit of work goes a long way in making this character stand out from a couple feet away, and he's only 15mm. Might do the same thing on this mounted figure. He is kind of a character. He's one of my few mounted characters who's wearing armor, along with this kind of random Norman that I have here. Not sure what I'm doing with him, but I painted him up. He's got money enough for mail. In reality, he's a Celt, but I'm using him as a Viking. Vikings didn't have a lot of horsemen as far as I'm aware. Ooh, too much there. Well, just roll with it. Just a little bit of interest. And on the front, a couple of dabs. And that's going to really stand out from far away and give him some visual interest. That's pretty much how I highlight my 15mm figures. Not a lot of work goes into them. But that's how I'm doing my Raven Feast Big Battles Army. Base coats and a wash that you saw in an earlier video. And then just one pass of highlights, 2 if they're a special character. And that's about it. Doesn't really take me that long. I average about 12 to 15 minutes a figure, just depending on how many bits and bobs are on them. So that's not really all that much. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment. After this, I'm going to be starting, about a year late, a Indomitus, a Warhammer 40k Indomitus project. So something a little different from historicals. I'll start posting that. Keep an eye out for that. Although I am going to be busy in the month of May with a move. So in the month of June, you might see some Indomitus stuff. Let me know if you have any questions, and keep on painting.